If you follow this channel for a while, you might know that I've owned both the Blackmagic Pocket 4K as well as the original Pocket from 2013. So in this video, we'll focus on how these two cameras can coexist and function as A and B cam. And if you own the Pocket 6K or 6K Pro instead of the 4K, everything in this video should still apply. Actually, since writing the script for this video, I sold my Pocket 4K and bought a 6K instead, and the workflow remains the same. I've previously published some blind tests and in-depth comparison between the two cameras, and I think the footage from those really demonstrate how closely you can match these two cameras. So I thought we would start with just looking at a few of those shots and see if you can tell them apart. And maybe some of you are currently thinking, is he seriously gonna reuse that footage one more time? Yes. Yes, I am. Quite close, right? And for those wondering, camera A was the original and B was the 4K. And just for my own amusement, I threw a spanner in the works and decided to let the Pocket 4K be both A and B for the last shot, with some slight reframing to make them look a little different. I think we can all agree that the cameras can match very closely if you bring them into Resolve and tweak a little. And I'll show you later on just how easy it is to get basically a 90% match with just a few clicks in Davinci Resolve. But in the case of the test footage you just watched, we made it even harder for the cameras to match compared to what it would be like in an A and B cam scenario. Because how often do you actually shoot the exact same shot with A and B cam? Never. You'll be shooting two different shots with the two cameras, meaning small differences won't be as apparent since you can't compare them head to head in the same way. But let's look at what using the two cameras and A and B cam would look like. I thought we would start with the camera settings and end with matching in Resolve. Okay, let's start with the settings on the Pocket 4K or 6K, or A cam. First of all, we want to make sure we are shooting in Blackmagic film. This will give us the maximum dynamic range out of the camera, as well as allowing us to match with the original. In between me deciding to make this video, writing the script and then actually filming it, Blackmagic released firmware update 7.3, which upgraded the Pocket 4K and 6K to Generation 5 color science, compared to Gen 4 pre-update. And since my workflow for easily matching the cameras involved Gen 4, this leads to a little change. If we shoot the Pocket 4K or 6K in B-RAW, we can change back to Gen 4 in Davinci Resolve. Therefore we want to make sure we are shooting in RAW. Pre-update, it didn't matter if we were shooting in RAW or ProRes, since the camera was shooting in Gen 4 natively. That's the menu settings you need to use on the Pocket 4K or 6K. Now simply set up your A-cam shots and expose as you normally would. Let's say that's at the native ISO 400, 180 degree shutter, 2.8 aperture, and 5600 Kelvin white balance, and we'll remember those for when we're setting up the B-cam. On the original Pocket, there are two settings in the menu that are important to get right for this to work out as we want it to. Number one is once again make sure we're shooting in Blackmagic film. Just like the Pocket 4K or 6K, this allows us to get the full dynamic range out of the camera, as well as allowing us to match the two cameras. Now set up your B-cam shots. And when it comes to matching exposure, there's one important thing to remember. If you watched my recently released video talking about the true ISO of the camera, you already know this. But when shooting in RAW, the camera's ISO 800 setting actually exposes closer to ISO 400. It exposes about 0.8 stops under compared to the 4K or 6K. So shooting ISO 800 on the original will get you much closer to the ISO 400 on the 4K or 6K. And then you can tweak the last difference in post. There's no real point in trying to compensate for it in camera, since it's even less than a third of a stop. I'll leave a link to that video where I go more in depth and explain it further, but to summarize, the camera exposes almost one stop darker than the claimed ISO in RAW, meaning that the native setting of 800 will match the exposure of our Pocket 4K or 6K at ISO 400. Therefore we can keep the same aperture of 2.8, 180 degree shutter, and 5600 Kelvin white balance. Shoot your scene, and let's head over to Davinci Resolve where we'll do the matching. Once in Resolve, let's start with our A-cam, the Pocket 4K. As I said earlier, this method and workflow revolves around Gen 4, so let's head over to our RAW settings and change it back to Generation 4 color science. Now grade it to your liking. If that means a simple log to Rec 709 conversion LUT, a color space transfer, or manual grade, it doesn't really matter, as long as we can apply the same nodes to the original. So let's do that. I'll start by copying the whole grade over to the original Pocket clip. So far it doesn't really look that great, but that's because it isn't in Gen 4 yet. The original natively shoots in Generation 1 color science, but when shooting in RAW we can change it to Gen 4 in Resolve. So let's do that. Go to your RAW settings and change color science from Gen 1 to Gen 4. Already much closer, but we can do a little bit better. If we look at the white balance, it doesn't actually say 5600 Kelvin, even though that's what we set it to in the camera. On the Pocket 4K, it does however, so let's change the original's white balance and tint to match. And in most cases, we're already 90% there. To tweak further, you can play a little bit with the RAW settings, like a slight exposure adjustment, tint, or white balance for example. If you want to add a node and tweak it there, make sure you add the node before any of the other nodes, as we want to match the clip before we add the grade from the 4K. If you want to go one step further, you could even use the superscale features in Resolve to upscale the original to 4K, just like I did in a previously released blind test between the two cameras. But there you have it, a simple and pretty straightforward way of matching the two cameras and using them as A and B cam. I hope it helped. But that pretty much wraps it up for this video. Like the video if you liked it, subscribe if you want to see some more, and I'll see you next time.